N1C has faster charge attacks which have the best AoE, so it's good for AoE fights. Aside from that, you generally use whatever you have the time for. Like in a rotation where you need to refresh skills quickly, you may only have time for N1C, or if you need to spend more time on Ayaka, you may be able to do a longer combo. Personally, I find N2C to be the most comfortable stock combo, the most natural default combo. I can also talk about Ayaka's full combo if you're including like her whole setup. There's so much variation. I also cover this in the advanced rotations vid if you want to watch that back to learn more. So dash N1 EQ or dash N1 QE are the default for maximum buffs. The dash gives cryo damage buff from her talent, the N1 gives damage bonus from Misplitter, and you either use E before Q if you want the fastest rotation and to pre-funnel energy into Ayaka, or you use Q first if you want to burst faster and you want a slightly bigger Misplitter buff on her E. After casting her burst, you generally don't spend too much time normal charge attacking after. With most teams, you really want to refresh buffs and debuffs and even battery Ayaka. It depends on how each team's cooldowns line up. Read my written guide if you want to know the timing for each specific team. I pretty much have rotations on almost every team. However, as covered in the advanced rotations vid, if you don't need full buffs, you can skip a lot of this combo on Ayaka to burst faster. So as I covered in that vid, skipping the dash N1 and just using Ayaka's burst straight away. Sometimes this can also help with positioning. There can be situations where Ayaka is already positioned well in an AoE situation and dashing can ruin that. I've shown many examples of this in the past. As I'm on the topic of rotations, another common question is how critical it is to learn these example rotations perfectly. It's not very important at all. However, it is helpful to study why moves are placed in the orders they are, why I put each thing in certain positions, which parts are crucial to the success of the team and which parts are optional. I think once you understand those, these rotations can be used just as guidelines. In fact, as I alluded to, many of these things can be tweaked and you can make your own decisions to adapt to each situation as you need. I've explained this before, but outside of Ayaka teams, there could be like Vape or Melt teams where Kazuha's burst absorbing the right element is crucial for your team's reactions. However, with Ayaka's teams, Kazuha's mostly here for his grouping and buffing, and you get his buffs and debuffs easily with either his burst or his skill. You can use either or you can use both. Obviously, a full setup with both is free damage, but as I've shown in previous videos, his personal damage isn't that crazy in these teams. It's not like he's doing overloads or he's doing quicken reactions. This also means if you don't always have energy for his burst, you don't have to worry too much about it. With Ayaka teams, there's a lot of flexibility that you will understand with time and practice. Like I said, use rotations as guidelines. So hopefully you found this video helpful. This video is for Ayaka players, not about whether you should play her or not. Since Sumeru has been out, a lot of people have been hyped on Dendro and a lot of people are asking me, is Ayaka even worth it anymore? But I'm not really interested in these discussions. I like her, I upload Abyss gameplay of her quite regularly. That's all there is to it. Thanks for watching. With Ayaka coming out in a few days, I know a lot of people watch me for Ayaka stuff, so I thought I'd make an updated FAQ or guide here. I'm not going to cover literally everything. If you want a full detailed guide, as always, you can check my written guide on the KQM website here. I'm also going to assume you know the basics about her. This can help me focus this video on the most useful sections. This is a very hot topic at the moment, but I think I'm well qualified to answer this. A lot of people have been saving for a while, so they may have excess Primogems. So when I see this question, this could be phrased in two ways. Either you want to know which upgrades are the strongest out of the options, or you just want to know which things are good or worth it. If you want a quick and easy answer, this is a priority order I can give. Yes, it's true that Misplitter is a big upgrade to Ayaka than Shenhe. Even if Kazuha was on banner this patch, it's also true that Kazuha can be ahead of Shenhe. This is also before considering Misplitter and Kazuha can be used with a variety of teams and characters. However, this is the misconception. Just because Shenhe isn't as big of an upgrade as these two things doesn't mean she is weak. She is still a good upgrade. So first of all, let's talk about Misplitter, which is very strong. It gives a lot of crit damage and elemental damage bonus. When you use Ayaka's burst, it would always gain at least 2 stacks. And if you add a normal attack somewhere before, then 3 stacks. I've made very in-depth weapon calcs. Some of you may have already seen these. Link will be in the description. They show variable builds and different situations. Remember, even though I made these calcs, weapon calcs are never supposed to be taken exactly as fact. Since it depends highly on your situation and your artifacts, there's a lot of variables. It's just a guideline. So how strong is Misplitter? Compared to R5 Amanoma Kageuchi, which is Ayaka's best 4-star free-to-play weapon, if I divide these numbers, it can be about 24 to 29% stronger. As some of you may already know, these numbers, this is one of the biggest upgrades of all characters in the game. I can say on average, most characters would get more like in between 10 to 20% of an upgrade, going from their 4-star to their 5-star. And then there's also more reasons on top which actually make it even stronger, which is that Ayaka is a hypercarry, meaning in most teams, she does the majority of your team's damage. This means that this 25 to 30% damage increase is pretty close to a 25 to 30% full team DPS increase. It's not going to be exactly like that, but you get the picture. In comparison with someone like Child, although he also gets a huge increase if you get Polar Star or Aqua Simulacra, because in the international team he shares his damage with Xiangling, overall the team increase is less. And then even if you've got Ayaka's second or third or fourth best weapons like Haran, Summit Shaper or Jade Cutter, seems like you're still getting over an 11% increase, maybe 15%. And then like I said before, even this is in line with what other characters could get compared to their 4-star weapons. These calcs also use optimized middle of the range artifacts. The artifact investment is known as KQM standard, which some may consider a fairly low investment. I would also like to say these optimized substats are somewhat favorable to these crit rate weapons like Haran or Jade Cutter. This is because even with minimal crit rate rolls, I'm close to already overcapping on crit rate with these weapons. It's likely with your own artifacts you will be in worse situations and you can't help but overcap. Meanwhile, Mistbitter is pretty good with all substats. You can even use crit damage or attack circlets, even attack goblets. So in conclusion, it's very flexible artifact wise, so Mistbitter can be even better than these calcs show. So now you know how strong it is. The next question is how valuable or how worthwhile it is to go for. Well, if we look at the cost of the weapon banner, I generally would say if you have around 180 pulls saved, you should be good. Now obviously, if you spend 180 pulls on this banner, you're also looking at potentially getting Calamity Queller, which I don't personally recommend much, unless you have everything else on the list, but it is nice if you have Shenhe. Now, what else could you be getting with these saved Prima Gems? Well, with that 180 pulls, you could guarantee Shenhe. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, whether it's the TC videos or the speedruns, you'll know Shenhe is very good and hard to calculate. To simplify things, Shenhe's burst gives a 15% buff and a 15% debuff. And her skill gives the big Icy Quill damage boost and another 15% buff depending on if you use her tap E or her hold E. So she gives quite a lot of buffs, and the way people use Shenhe is you initially set up her burst and skill, set up the rest of her team, use Ayaka's burst, and then you bring Shenhe back after Ayaka's burst for another round of the Icy Quills. For this part, tap E if you want a shorter cooldown but lower damage, or use hold E to squeeze out a bit more damage if you don't need to worry about a longer cooldown, say if you're fighting a boss and you really want to push to the next phase. This is a common question: is Shenhe bad against multiple enemies? Whilst it's true that Shenhe's Icy Quills have limited scaling in AoE, a key thing to understand is this is only a part of her kit. Half of Shenhe's kit is providing moderate buffs and debuffs to teammates, in particular buffing Ayaka, who is the true AoE damage source in your team. Also, due to Shenhe's power budget, the way she is as a character is focused on buffing teammates. I've covered this in my previous video. The more invested and built your Ayaka is, the more bang for your buck you get out of Shenhe. So she gets stronger the more invested Ayaka is. This means regardless, in practice, she is shown to be still contributing sizably in AoE, despite losing efficiency of her Icy Quills. But don't misunderstand, even if you don't have Shenhe, then teammates like Ganyu or Rosaria, even Chongyun are still good. Whenever you play an Ayaka team, you pretty much always want to have at least one other cryo teammate to help with energy and to battery Ayaka. An extra benefit with 2 cryo characters in your team is also 15% more crit rate from cryo resonance. Speaking of Shenhe, there's also this common thought that she's a worse battery for Ayaka than other cryos. This is usually derived from the fact that she has longer cooldowns on her skill, so theoretically she can generate energy less frequently. However, I can tell you this, it doesn't really matter which cryo support you play. Unless you extend your downtime, each cryo only really gets to use their skill twice per Ayaka burst, or you can say twice per rotation, and they all basically generate 3 to 4 particles per skill. You can look it up, and most of them will be using a Favonius weapon. So generally speaking, the battery for cryo supports is fairly similar. Even Kaya, who has a talent which gives extra particles versus frozen enemies, he only gives 2 to 3 by default and 3 to 5 with freeze. But if you aren't hitting a frozen enemy twice per rotation, it's not that much different. There's also Ganyu, who gives 2 plus 2 instead of 4 at once. Also, most people might give her a damage weapon rather than Favonius bow, but you can give her Favonius bow and the battery will be good. Whilst I'm on this topic, the other advantage to Shenhe is after using Ayaka's burst, with Shenhe it's actually a damage gained to switch to her to battery Ayaka, since it reapplies her Icy Quills for more damage. For other supports, although the battery is always very helpful, they aren't really reapplying buffs, so the damage will be weaker than if you just stayed attacking on Ayaka. So a TLDR on Shenhe is, obviously she is an investment, and not everyone wants to fork out the Prima Gems to get her, and is clearly